Well, hey everyone, Athena Dean Holtz here, and welcome to the Redeemed and Restored broadcast on my YouTube channel, where we connect every Friday so that together we can intentionally discover the faithfulness of God. So today's episode is the very first in our new season, where we are transitioning over to a weekly interview with author friends of mine who have amazing stories of redemption and restoration. Those whose lives have been redeemed and restored by God in a way that encourages others to trust Him more and recognize His faithfulness more clearly. My very first guest of season 2 is Janet McHenry. She is a national speaker and the author of 24 books, including 2 bestsellers, PrayerWalk, which was published by WaterBrook, RandomHouse, and 50 Life Lessons for Grads, published by Worthy. A former high school English teacher, she and her rancher husband, Craig, raised 4 children in the Sierra Valley. The beautiful setting has inspired her to follow her passions, prayer walking and writing. You can find out more about Janet through her website, which I'll have listed below in the broadcast description. So I happen to be filming the introduction to this week's broadcast at this amazing eclectic venue in Enumclaw, where we are spending a week with our very first She Writes for Him in-person writing retreat, where Janet McHenry is our teacher for the week. I am out here on the deck, and it is the most delightful and glorious place to be and to write and to brainstorm and support each other on our writing journey. So you know the drill. Be sure to like, follow, share, comment, and click on the notification bell in one of those corners. Maybe even start a conversation under the discussion tab. So hey, let's get started. Very first of the episodes of Redeemed and Restored with our new format. And I am super excited to have Janet McHenry with us today. Welcome to the Redeemed and Restored broadcast.
Thank you, Athena.
Yeah.
Super exciting.
Yes. I just think back 6 years-ish or so when I was at the Northwest Christian Women's Retreat, and Janet was the keynote speaker, and we've been friends on Facebook. We've met each other at Mount Hermon, so we knew each other, but I had never heard her story. And it is, what a story of redemption and restoration. So I am super excited that she can be the first one to come on and share that story with you all. So why don't we just start with set up the scene, because it's a pretty amazing thing that happened, but there's a lot of hard stuff working up to it.
There's a lot. So I live in the Sierra Valley, which is about an hour north of Lake Tahoe. Picture Lake Tahoe, except without the water. That's where we live. And I was a high school English teacher there, and my husband is a cattle rancher. He raises beef cattle. So living in the Sierra, as we do at 5,000 feet, you get a lot of snow. And in the early winter of 2001, there was a 2-day blizzard that completely covered over 6 calves and an old bull who had bedded down together to shelter each other from the storm. They got covered over by snow, and they were there a couple weeks. They'd all died. Craig didn't know about it. It was in a remote part of the ranch, and he found out of it because he got a knock on the door one day, and there was a man there from the sheriff's department issuing a summons for his arrest. And he was charged with 7 felony animal counts of cruelty. We just thought that this would be something we lived through. Necropsies on the animal actually proved that there was 20 pounds of feed in one animal's stomach and a high level of colostrum in the other animal. So we know that the animals did not die of neglect. They simply got covered over in snow in a 2-day blizzard. So we just thought, again, we would just have to live through this. And it finally went to trial from December of 2001. It went to trial all the way into May of 2005.
Whoa.
So it was a long period of time in preparation. We just were trying to count down the days, 2-week trial, just live through it. And the problem was that the judge seemed to have it out for my husband from the get-go. And he harassed witnesses of the defense who were on the stand. And I know this personally because I was one of those witnesses. I had seen and was testifying about how my husband would bring baby calves home and take the towels and warm them up and keep them in the bathtub until it was warm enough. And my kids would joke with me, Mom, I'd say, Mom, don't go in the bathroom. And I knew exactly what was there. It was another little calf who was just trying to make it. Anybody who is in the farming or ranching business knows that if you have livestock, you have dead stock. It's just a matter of fact.
That's just life, right?
It's just
people live, people die, and so do livestock.
Yes, they absolutely do. And a lot of it has nothing to do with anybody's neglect. So the judge would harass the witnesses, and so I'm trying to explain what my husband would do, and the judge interrupts me at one point and says, "Who do you think you are, Virginia Woolf, that you go on and on like this?" He knew me to be an English teacher and a writer, so he knew that I knew Virginia Woolf was an 1800s writer who was a stream of consciousness kind of writer. So what he was doing was, insinuating that I was going on and rambling, and I was just telling him a bunch of nonsense. So he did that with every single defense witness. He would not allow my husband's auction records to be admitted into court, and the records would have shown that Craig got really good prices for his beef when he took them to auction. And the worst part was that he would not allow the testimony of Dr. John Moss, who was the chief beef cattle expert. He wrote the textbook on how to treat cattle at UC Davis Veterinary School. That man had never agreed to testify in a trial in his entire life, but he felt so strongly about my husband's case that he came, and he was not being paid to testify. He just wanted to see the right thing done. So things did not go well.
So the judge would not let him testify?
He would not let him testify.
Wow.
The chief witness. It was like you kind of save your last big punch to the end.
Right.
And Craig got to court and found out that his witness was not going to be able to testify. So I remember a very alarming scene the last day of the trial when the jury is out and we're waiting for them to come back, and we're sitting outside the courtroom, and the jurors are walking down the hall towards us with disgusted looks on their faces. And I got this sinking feeling in my gut. Oh my gosh, how could this possibly be true? And sure enough, they convicted my husband Craig on 6 animal felony counts of animal abuse. So this is not a simple lawsuit. Some people will say, well, I've had a little lawsuit too with my neighbor, and it must be like that. I'm like, no, this is like you can go to prison for. My husband could have gone to prison for as many as 3 years. He could have had extensive fines. He could have had all his cattle taken away from him, because in theory, if he's not doing the right thing, he shouldn't be a rancher, right?
Right.
Well, so then we had about 2 months between the time of the trial and the sentencing. I didn't do so well with that. I got super mad at my husband that he could somehow have allowed this to happen, which was an irrational idea that he allowed it. He didn't allow it to happen. It was just what I call, a case of injustice. So, and I was also angry. I was angry at those 12 jurors because we had been planted in that community for a long time. We were respected people. He himself had done volunteer work in the community. He had served as a county supervisor. And so I just like, why, God? Why would you have allowed this to happen? Even the chief juror, was the son of a woman that I prayer walked with. And
So you waited 4 years to get to trial.
Right.
So that was hanging over your head for 4 years. And you would have had to think, knowing that that he's innocent, that God would come in and save the day and
Right.
everything would be okay.
Right.
And it wasn't.
It wasn't.
You had to be angry with God over that.
I was not a happy camper, and the fact that, another one of the jurors was a woman who substituted in my classes, and another juror was the business manager of the school district, and we're talking very small communities, so 40 entire teachers in the whole school district. I knew her well, and had bought her crafts at crafts fairs, things like that. So it was a sincere struggle of faith at that time.
Not bad.
And I even tried to open my Bible and just look for God's encouragement, God's word of some kind to help me get through. And it was just like gray mass there almost. I couldn't focus on anything. I did pick up L.B. Cowman's devotional book, Streams in the Desert.
Oh, my all-time favorite. When you're suffering, it doesn't get any better than Streams in the Desert.
I had tried to pick up that devotional before, but just nothing resonated with me or whatever. And but every single word in that spoke to me, and I began underlining things in there, writing annotations. And in fact, when we were heading to the courtroom the day of the actual sentencing, a couple months later, I took that with me, and I just read those scriptures and those encouragements and pieces of poetry out loud to my husband. And I just saw him just like, whew, it just settled in, and peace was beginning to settle over him. And as he walked into that courtroom, I saw a different man. And we were very encouraged when we got to the courtroom. We went in at the last minute to find that the court was entirely filled with friends, a couple family members, 6 pastors, local citizens who had, some significant weight in the community. And so we were encouraged by that, and it unsettled the judge. We could tell his demeanor was completely different. He wasn't arrogant. He didn't try to control things. He didn't have any kind of sarcastic remarks at all. And so the result of the sentencing was that he got 4 years of probation, my husband, and a $40,000 fine, which we didn't have that money. We still had to pay attorney's fees, and so Craig had to sell out a lot of his cattle. He could have gotten 3 years in prison. He could have had all his cattle taken away. As it was, at that time, he was working on his PhD program at the University of Nevada, Reno in political science with the hope of teaching at the college level, just as maybe an adjunct professor or something like that. But this meant he couldn't teach, he couldn't practice law, he couldn't leave the state.
Oh my
Couldn't leave the state, and we worshipped at a church in Reno, Nevada. So that meant every week at least we were crossing over a state line. So we had to get permission to do that. One of the oddest feelings we had one day was with his first meeting with the probation officer, and I had to do that. And my husband actually owns the business that's rented by the probation department. So we walk into this meeting.
You can't make this stuff up.
No, it's insane. We walk in, and the woman comes up. She goes, "Oh, Craig, we just can't get this light to work. And could you think you'll be able to come down and fix it and check it for us?" And I'm just like in this weird zone. Could this really be happening? Respected member of the community to be have to go through this situation. So time passes, and we fire the attorney. And because my husband himself actually was an attorney, he had his own law practice for about 15 years, and I worked for him for about 10. We prepared the appeal, and we took that appeal to, it was filed with the California Court of Appeals. It took a long time to get the transcripts from the actual trial, so we'd have that to work on. So we he filed the appeal. We went down together and filed that, and it took until January of 2007, so this is like almost 2 years later, waiting for a judgment on that. Wow. And we went to that appeals hearing. Craig only was given about 10 minutes to make any kind of statement, so that kind of unsettled us for a while. We weren't sure about exactly how that was going to go. And so then he makes his statement, summarizes the succinct arguments, the best arguments that he can do. And then we wait for a pause and then hear from the first appellate judge. And he says, that he's read through everything. And he notes the highlights of our appeal and said that there were significant problems with it, but the worst was that the chief witness was not allowed to testify. And so we were like, wow, somebody actually read the evidence. The district attorney never even interviewed any of the defense witnesses, which is really criminal. Really criminal. I mean, because their objective is not for conviction. Their object should be for justice.
Right.
Not conviction. They'd be always seeking justice, and he didn't even attempt to seek justice in the matter. So, and the second judge said the same thing. The second judge said basically the same thing, and they overturned the case. Wow. So we got the final paperwork on that in May of 2007. So it was, a significant amount of time in the beginning to the end with, a lot of hardship in between.
But then there was another thing going on underneath all of this.
Absolutely.
Tell us, as we wrap the last 5 minutes of this up, tell us the prayer that God answered in that whole thing.
Well, for years, you may have imagined, I had been praying, God, save my marriage. God, save my marriage. And change my husband. Isn't that how we always pray? Change my husband,
They're
Lord.
the problem.
They're the problem. So the day of the sentencing, after the sentencing, we walked outside the courtroom, and in a parking lot, there was my husband with all his guy friends around him and the pastors. And there I am with another circle around me, all my lady friends and so forth. And Craig is like, I don't know, he doesn't seem depressed. I think he felt like, okay, so this is what it is now. And my mom said, she says, your husband, Craig, he could run for mayor and win, because he seemed to have a popular following. The newspapers before then had been filled every single 2 weeks with letters from the editor supporting him. And then another friend said, Janet, look at your husband. She says his demeanor in the courtroom was incredible. He had such peace of God over him, and he seemed so composed and just trusting that everything is going to work out. She goes, I've never seen him like this. Have you noticed a change in him? And I really, at that moment, I looked over him and I thought, my husband has changed through this. This husband I was so mad at, so angry at, resentful of, for sort of allowing this to happen to us, became a changed man through the situation. And I think part of it was he saw my commitment to him, to stick with him, to help him with this, to work through the actual appeal together, and all of that. I mean, eventually working through the appeal, but there were significant changes. It was kind of it was the jump start of a complete change in our marriage. He always called me dear, which I just thought it was just a term, but he started calling me beautiful and just, lovely one and things like that. And I think he began to see me differently, and I began to see him differently.
That just makes me weepy. I mean, weepy, joyous weep.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
So here you are a bunch of years later, and God certainly redeemed that whole horrible situation in our life. Could I say that I'd want to go through that again? No. Let us learn it some other way, Lord, like through your word.
Yeah.
through happy times or whatever. But there certainly was redemption of that whole experience because of how we came together, we worked together, we began to understand and appreciate one another for the rest of our lives. So.
Yeah. Well, I think I've heard somewhere that adversity faced together creates a bond that is not the norm. It really bonds two people together when they go through something hard. And you did that, and God used that. I mean, this was a great Romans 8:28 story of how God worked all things, even that horrible injustice, everything that was just, it couldn't be more wrong, that final sentencing. But God used that for good because you love him and are called according to his purposes, both of you.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. So, whoo, that was powerful.
Yeah.
So, what scripture would you share with those who are watching, who are maybe they've been redeemed but feel like they're still not restored and really need to hold on to something?
I have to cling always to Jeremiah 29:11, which is probably familiar to you people here. For I know the plans I have for your life, plans to give you hope and a future. And during that time, you know, all those many years, like, well, my why questions, God had a hope and a future for us. So. And part of that is enjoying a whole bunch of wonderful grandchildren together.
Yay!
So,
and he's still farming and cattle ranching. Is that the correct term?
Yes.
So he is still in that business, and you have been vindicated.
Yes.
And the community now sees, you know, I mean, but you had to live under that for how many years?
5.5 years.
Wow.
5.5 years. And, with some situations like that, legal cases, there will always be snarky people, who'll say, oh, he really was guilty, he got off, or something like that. There'll be those kinds of people, but they're going to be snarky about anything. They can probably find anything they want to make judgment on you. So it is kind of hard. It's hard to live those things down, but you choose to look up when you're trying to live down those past situations of your life.
And to just be able to, Jesus he was misunderstood and he didn't say a word, and that's a hard thing to do. But God, he made it all right in the end and brought truth and justice into the situation. And wow. What a story. Woo! What a great one to start off our new season of Redeemed and Restored and our new format. So, Janet, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Yes. And we will see you all next week, same time, same place. Bye for now. Hey, so thanks for joining us today on the Redeemed and Restored video broadcast, brought to you by me, Athena Dean Holtz, who happens to be a horse lover, and the Romans 8:28 bookstore, which is a division of Redemption Press, which is right down the street that way, around the corner, right here in downtown Enumclaw, where everything is happening. So I would love to have you review and share this broadcast with friends, family, and others who could use the encouragement. And if you know someone who might prefer the audio podcast version of today's episode, you can go over to redeemedandrestoredpodcast.com and share a link from there. So thank you so much for joining me today. See you next week right here on YouTube for another episode of Redeemed and Restored.